Were you surprised at all the types of things people brought up here? I mean, is this the same kind of issues that you're hearing everywhere?
The only issue today that was unique to here certainly was the Mercury issue, and I think it was because it is, sort of locally focused as a company here in town that would be affected. I do hope that, and I really think we can, I think we'll end up in an arrangement that works where the company is not put out of business, but at the same time, the goals of getting where we need to get are achieved. At least that's when I'm going to work to get happening. But everything else was the same. I mean, the issues about the Fed and health care, and we've heard many of those same issues throughout our state.
Olin is one of the reasons that Corker is coming here, isn't it?
We know that, and I'm very, very familiar. I've met with the Olin representatives, and I've met with leaders, people who represent that industry. And again, I think there's a way for us to get where we need to go. I think Olin knows that they're going to have to make some changes, okay? The issue is that it takes a huge amount of capital expense to do it, and you can't just turn on a dime. So I think we'll get where we need to go, but do so in a way that makes it work out in a way that's beneficial to Bradley County.
What were your thoughts on just sort of the passion of the crowd? I mean, they're not necessarily angry at you, but they're clearly upset and want to make sure you knew how upset they are.
Yeah, I think, look, I think it's wonderful, and I think a lot of times the debates that we have in Washington almost seem, sometimes they lack that emotion, if you will. And today to see that, again, I just think it's incredible. And I've been in audiences where literally they'll point to line X in the bill, and on page 370 or whatever. I'm just making up a page number, but the fact that people are so well informed right now and tuned in, I think it's just great. And look, there were people in the audience that also disagree with some of the things that I've done. It's not going to be, you're not going to have a perfect record with everyone. That's not the way democracy works. But I'm glad to see people, whether they agree or disagree, but certainly turning out in this number, as has happened all across our state, I think says a lot about people's heartfelt concerns about the direction of the country today. You
mentioned a couple of the House bills basically going in circulate into the trash can.
Right.
Basically, what do you see happening?
I think that I think most people in reality are looking at the Senate Finance Committee to hopefully come up with something that's in the middle of the road, that is pragmatic. I've got concerns, and I'm saying this both. I saw Chuck Grassley just the other day, and he's part of the negotiating team. I've shared with him my concerns about taking $410 billion out of Medicare, which is insolvent, to create a new entitlement. That's a great concern. I've shared my concerns about putting a $465 million a year liability on the state of Tennessee. And so it's my hope. Chuck, again, I just saw him a few days ago. I know he's having town hall meetings in his state that are highly, highly attended. And hopefully that when they get back in Washington, they'll do something that, we all have to vote on it. And we're all going to be highly involved. As I mentioned, the President and I met just 3 weeks ago on this issue. We're going to be in the middle of this, I can assure you, even though we're not on the Finance Committee. But I hope, again, we will end up something. As one gentleman came up to me after this meeting, he said, I just wish every bill would be seen through the lens of, does it pass the test, the common sense test? And to me, that's not where we've been in this debate so far.
What's your feeling about health co-ops, health insurance co-ops, as an alternative to the public?
Well, I read certainly the national publications, and actually the local publications today were talking about that. It depends on what that means, okay? Kent Conrad, who generally perceived to be the author of that idea, I don't think he planned on it being guaranteed by the government or given government ability purchasing power. I think Chuck Schumer, on the other hand, thinks that it ought to be really a government type co-op. So it depends on what it is. I mean, if you look back at Blue Cross, it actually, I think, began as a co-op. I mean, that's what it was in the beginning. So if it's something that has absolutely no government backing, what would be the harm in it? I mean, you can do that today anyway. If it's something that ends up being basically a front for a government plan, then to me it's off limits, out of bounds, and shouldn't be done.
Obviously a pretty complicated issue. I have a lot of questions for everybody, but what to you would be your most important thing that you want to make sure is included in whatever reform comes about?
Well, I think, you know, look, first of all, I think it needs to be built off of the system that we now have. You know, the first thing is do no harm. You don't want to, you know, there are a number of people, 68% of people in our country are happy with the health care that they have. And so what you don't want to do is destroy that, okay? I think it has to be budget neutral. Something that, you know, we heard from young students here in high school, Cleveland High School, are concerned about debt in the future. They should be. And I think it's something, you know, it needs to be something that continues to make sure that there's competition. And so it needs to be, in my opinion, again, built off the private sector, do no harm, and something that you know, doesn't add to our deficit issue. But by the way, we play games in Washington with a 10-year budget window that they're called scoring games, okay? And one of the reasons that they're looking at taking $410 billion out of Medicare is that they can use that to make it score neutral over a 10-year period. But you end up with we've got a $40 trillion unfunded liability. And so to me, when we talk about budget neutrality, it needs to be real budget neutrality, where you know that after this 10-year window is over, you're not doing something that in the 11th year creates a huge budget gap and from that day forward hurts our country fiscally.
There are a lot of counties in Tennessee, rural counties, whose economies are based largely on industry and manufacturing, and that's been some of the hardest hit industries in the state. What would you tell folks who have lost their jobs and jobless rates have skyrocketed along with so many others, who have lost their jobs, who don't have that health insurance for their families and are just at ground zero, just have no choices really? What would you say to them specifically to comfort them at this time when they have kids that have to go to the doctor, when they have their own issues?
Yeah. Well, it's very difficult to comfort in a real way people who have lost their jobs. I mean, I don't know of anything more important to heads of households than to be able to provide for their family. And so, you know, there's numbers of things. Number one, you know, the last thing we need to do is to add more burdens on business that make it even more difficult. I mean, much of what we do when we mandate certain things to business is we make it less likely that they're going to want to bring more employees on, okay? So first of all, let's make sure we don't make the situation worse. Let's go back to the comment I made a minute ago, let's do no harm. There are some things, matter of fact, a young lady said something to me on the way out. Maybe we should extend COBRA periods much longer. Still though, COBRA a lot of times can end up costing 2 or 3 or 4 times what it was costing when you were at the company. So I would say that again, if we can create the types of exchanges that I was talking about, where people can end up accessing the type of health care that I have and others have, and do so in a competitive way, though over the long haul, those are solutions to work. Candidly, there are mechanisms, you know, one of the things I didn't talk about today, but the employer exclusion piece. I mean, if you capped it at some reasonable amount, it actually creates the ability to help people purchase private insurance. So I think there are, again, if we can end up with some pragmatic, middle-of-the-road health care reform, I think it's going to go a long ways towards helping people that end up not having insurance by an employer, either because they're unemployed or their employer doesn't provide it, but helping them be able to access a system in a more affordable way.
Senator, how does veterans health care fit in?
I don't think there's been any, there's been no focus on changing veterans health care in any way. And I think actually I read something in one of the national publications today that it's been overtly put out there that it will not be touched, I guess, by one of the House bills. But there really hasn't been a focus in this health care reform debate to change the way veterans get their health care.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks.
Hey, thank you guys for coming out. Have a good day, and thanks for hanging with us so long.
Thank you very much.